Hi, my name is Emily Parker. I'm 35 years old, and I serve as a major in the United States Army. To the world outside, my uniform carries weight, discipline, and honor. But inside my own home, it has always felt like nothing more than a burden I'm forced to carry. My mother and younger sister never saw the rank, the sacrifices, or the missions that shaped me. To them, I was just a guard, nothing more. The day that truth cut the deepest was Sophie's graduation party. Our house in the suburbs of Denver was full of relatives and neighbors, balloons floating above the dining table, a big "Congratulations, Sophie" banner stretched across the wall. Everyone kept patting Sophie's back, calling her the pride of the family, the true achiever. I stood quietly in the corner, my dress uniform pressed and neat, a small silver coin resting in my pocket, a challenge coin I had earned after one of the toughest missions of my career. "Look at our Sophie," my mother said loudly to the room, her hand on my sister's shoulder. "She's what we always dreamed of, educated, successful, the real star of our family." I felt dozens of eyes turned towards Sophie, all smiling, all nodding. Then one distant relative glanced at me and asked casually, "And what does Emily do again?" Before I could open my mouth, Sophie smirked, tilted her head, and replied, "Oh, she's basically a security guard. Nothing glamorous." The crowd laughed softly, some awkwardly, but no one defended me. Not even my mother. In fact, she joined in with a proud chuckle, as though the comparison made Sophie shine brighter. I swallowed the words I wanted to say, letting the laughter hang in the air. My heart was steady, my face calm, but inside me a storm brewed. I thought of the nights I had spent in desert heat, the silence of mountains before dawn raids, the weight of decisions that meant life or death. Yet here, in my own home, I was invisible. I placed my hand on the coin in my pocket, grounding myself with the reminder that real honor didn't need applause. Just then, my phone buzzed. The screen flashed with a coded message. "Priority call, report to base." I excused myself without explanation. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. The music and laughter swallowed me whole as I walked out the door. Outside, the cool Denver air met my face, and for a moment I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My family didn't see me, but my country did, and that was enough to keep moving. The drive back to Fort Carson was silent except for the hum of the engine. My phone buzzed again with updates, and I switched gears in my head. At home, I was invisible, but on base. Every decision I made carried weight. By the time I pulled through the checkpoint gates, the atmosphere was electric. Screens glowing in the operations room, officers leaning over maps, radios crackling with half-finished transmissions. I walked in, and heads turned, not with mockery, not with dismissal, but with respect. Lieutenant Sarah Miles handed me a briefing folder as if it were sacred. Sergeant Danny Cruz looked at me with the steady eyes of someone who trusted me with his life. The air shifted when Colonel James Whitaker stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. "Major Parker, we've got eyes on chatter. Possible coordinated threat near downtown Denver. We'll need immediate assessment." I nodded, already scanning the map. My mind clicked into focus. Target zones, choke points, exit routes. I didn't hear laughter here. I heard clarity. I heard trust. As we built the strategy, Whitaker caught my eye. "Remember, Parker," he said in his usual even tone, "we win quietly." That sentence carried more power than any of the backhanded compliments I had ever gotten from my family. Winning quietly meant protecting lives, preventing chaos, and going unrecognized so others could sleep safely in their beds. Hours later, when the meeting adjourned, I stepped outside for a moment of air. From my pocket, I pulled the same challenge coin I had clutched at Sophie's party. It felt heavier now, not just metal, but a reminder of two worlds I straddled. At home, my mother was probably posting Sophie's graduation pictures online, captions dripping with pride. In this world, my world, men and women waited for my word to move. The contrast cut deeper than any insult my family could throw. One world saw me as nothing. The other world trusted me with everything. And though my heart ached for my family's acknowledgement, I knew which world truly defined me. A few days later, I found myself sitting at the family dinner table again. The house smelled of roasted chicken and garlic bread, Sophie's favorite meal. My mother had gone all out, as if Sophie's graduation had turned into a month-long festival. I sat quietly, listening to Sophie recount stories about her professors, her final exams, her future plans. Every word she spoke was met with applause, with smiles, with admiration. Then, as the plates clinked and conversation swirled, my mother leaned forward and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Sophie," she said, her eyes glowing with pride, "you've made us so proud. You are the real accomplishment in this family. Emily, well, she hasn't achieved much compared to you." The words dropped like stones in the room. Sophie smirked, stabbing her fork into a piece of bread. "Yeah," she added lightly, "Emily's just guarding doors while the rest of us move forward." I sat there, my jaw tightening but my expression calm. I could feel the weight of every eye at the table pressing on me, waiting to see how I would react. Part of me wanted to slam my hand down, to tell them about the lives I'd saved, the missions I'd led, the nights I'd stared down death and come back stronger. But instead, I drew a breath and met my mother's eyes. "Not every achievement is meant to be announced," I said evenly, my voice steady but sharp enough to cut. The table went quiet. For a brief second, the air shifted, but then Sophie laughed, and my mother shook her head as though I had just spoken nonsense. The conversation drifted back to Sophie's future job interviews, and just like that, my words were erased, forgotten. I sat back, my hands folded in my lap, and swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. My family didn't want to see me. They didn't want to know me. They wanted the version of me that fit their story, the failure, the shadow standing behind Sophie's spotlight. But deep down, a fire was beginning to build. They had no idea what I was capable of. They had no idea what was coming. The night after that dinner, I was still awake, staring at the ceiling, my sister's words echoing in my mind like a cruel refrain. "She's just guarding doors." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to breathe through the sting. It was nearly midnight when my phone buzzed again, this time, not with family chatter or meaningless updates, but with the coded alert that snapped me straight out of bed. Alert: potential coordinated attack. Target: Denver downtown. Immediate briefing required. Within an hour, I was back at Fort Carson. The operations room glowed under harsh fluorescent lights, maps spread wide, satellite images streaming live across the screens. I could feel the urgency in every voice, every quick step, every hand pointing to coordinates. Colonel Whitaker's expression was hard but steady as he gestured toward me. "Major Parker, you're leading this one." I didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir." The next few hours blurred into sharp, decisive moments. With Sarah and Danny at my side, we pieced together fragments of intercepted chatter, identifying drop points and escape routes. Each call I made carried weight, sending one team to secure a bridge, another to lock down a subway entrance, and my own unit to intercept the suspected convoy. My chest burned with a familiar mix of adrenaline and clarity. As the city above slept, we moved like shadows through its veins. Night vision goggles lit up empty streets, our boots silent on concrete. Every muscle in my body was focused, tuned to the rhythm of radio crackles and the sound of my own breath inside the helmet. Then, at the crucial moment, our team closed in, intercepting a van packed with explosives, the suspects caught off guard, their plan shattered in seconds. There was no cheering, no applause, just firm grips and silent nods as we secured the area. Hundreds of lives had been saved, but no one outside this circle would ever know how close the city had come to disaster. That was the job. That was the oath. When I finally exhaled, the words of Colonel Whitaker echoed in my mind again. "We win quietly." And in that quiet, I felt both the strength of my purpose and the ache of knowing my own family would never understand it. By dawn, Denver was safe again. The van sat in a secured lot under heavy guard, its deadly cargo defused and catalogued. The suspects were in custody, their plans shredded into pieces that would never see daylight again. My team, exhausted but steady, returned to Fort Carson for debrief. There were no medals, no handshakes from the public, just the quiet acknowledgement between soldiers who knew what had been prevented. I walked back to my quarters, boots still dusty, adrenaline slowly seeping out of my veins. My reflection in the small mirror above the sink showed dark circles beneath my eyes, but also the steady gaze of someone who had once again carried the weight no one else could see. I pulled the challenge coin from my pocket and set it carefully on the desk. In the silence of that room, It gleamed brighter than any trophy in Sophie's display case. Later that evening, I returned to my mother's house for another family dinner. The table was alive with chatter again, Sophie reliving her graduation highlights for anyone who would listen. My mother fussed over her plate, serving her favorite dessert, her voice loud with pride. Then, almost as if she had been waiting for the perfect moment, she glanced at me and said, "Emily, I hope you find something real to do with your life soon. Guard duty isn't a future." Sophie laughed softly, sipping her drink. Maybe she could get a job at my university. They need security at the library. The room erupted in chuckles, harmless to them but sharp daggers to me. They had no idea that while they laughed, the city outside breathed safely because of me. No idea that a van full of explosives had nearly ended hundreds of lives the night before. I didn't argue. I didn't even flinch. I simply sat back, letting the words wash over me, my mind holding tight to the truth they would never know, that my silence was the only reason they could sit here carefree in the first place. It was a strange kind of revenge, protecting people who would never value the protector. But deep down, a part of me knew the silence wouldn't last forever. Truth had a way of breaking through. 2 nights later, I was in my quarters at Fort Carson, finishing after-action reports, when the television in the lounge caught my attention. A news anchor's voice cut into the usual cycle of politics and weather. "We interrupt this broadcast with a special announcement from the White House." I froze. The screen shifted to a live feed from Washington, D.C., where a podium stood adorned with the presidential seal. A woman in a crisp navy suit stepped forward, the White House press secretary, Karen Mitchell. She began reading from a paper in her hand, her voice firm, carrying across every living room in America. "Tonight, the President of the United States extends the nation's gratitude to the men and women who acted with extraordinary courage to prevent a coordinated terrorist attack in Denver. Among those recognized for valor, Major Emily Parker of the United States Army awarded the Presidential Commendation for Valor." My name rang out in clear, deliberate syllables. For a moment, I thought I had misheard, but then the screen flashed with images, blurred but unmistakable, of my unit in gear securing the scene. The anchor's voice followed, praising unsung heroes who had saved countless lives. Back in Denver, my mother and Sophie were watching too. I could imagine the way Sophie's smirk would falter, how my mother's proud posture would collapse into shock. For years, they had brushed me aside, laughed at me, dismissed me. Now, with the entire nation listening, my name carried the weight they had denied me. My phone lit up within seconds. Missed calls from my mother, text messages from relatives who had once ignored me, even a voicemail from Sophie that began with, "Emily, we didn't know." I sat there in the dim light of the lounge, staring at the screen, my chest heavy not with pride, but with clarity. They knew now. The world knew now. And nothing would ever be the same again. The official invitation arrived just 2 days later. Denver Central High School, Sophie's alma mater, was hosting a local Heroes Day to honor those recognized by the president. My name was printed in bold on the program. For a brief moment, I thought about declining. Part of me wanted to stay in the shadows, where I'd always been comfortable. But another part, the part that remembered every smirk, every laugh, every careless insult, knew I had to go. When I walked into the auditorium in my dress uniform, the room shifted. Conversations hushed, eyes turned, and whispers rippled across the rows of parents and students. The stage was draped with American flags, the words "Celebrating Our Heroes" glowing on the screen behind the podium. Mr. Robert Hayes, the principal, began reading names. Firefighters, police officers, community leaders all stepped forward to applause. Then he paused, his eyes lifting toward me. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Major Emily Parker, recipient of the Presidential Commendation for Valor." The crowd rose to its feet. The sound of clapping filled the auditorium, echoing like thunder. For the first time, in front of strangers and neighbors alike, I wasn't invisible. I was seen. I walked across the stage, each step measured, my head high. From the corner of my eye, I spotted them, my mother sitting stiffly in the second row, Sophie beside her, pale and wide-eyed. Their faces told the story better than words ever could. Shock, regret, the sudden realization of just how wrong they had been. As the applause died down, I accepted the plaque and shook the principal's hand. Then it happened. My mother and Sophie rushed forward, pushing through the crowd toward the stage. Cameras turned, flashes burst. My mother's voice cracked as she reached for me. "Emily, we're so proud of you. Please, let's put the past behind us." Sophie's eyes glistened as she whispered, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean all those things." I stood still, my hands at my sides, the weight of the nation's recognition still warm in my chest. For years, I had dreamed of these words, of this moment where they would finally admit I was more than what they had painted me to be. And now, with the world watching, it was mine to claim. But instead of stepping forward, I took a single step back. My voice was steady, my heart unshaken. "No, you only see me now because the cameras do. When I needed you, when my silence was protecting you, you laughed. You dismissed me, and I won't forget that." The auditorium was silent except for the hum of the lights. I let the pause hang heavy before finishing. "My family now is my country." Gasps rose from the crowd. My mother's hand froze in midair. Sophie's face crumpled, and I turned away, saluting the audience one last time before stepping down to rejoin my unit. In that moment, the lines were drawn, not in anger, but in truth. I had finally set myself free. When the ceremony ended, I didn't look back. The applause still echoed in my ears, but it wasn't what stayed with me. What stayed was the image of my mother's outstretched hand, frozen in midair, and Sophie's trembling lips, searching for words they should have spoken years ago. I left them there, surrounded by cameras and whispers, and walked toward the only people who had ever truly understood me, my unit. Outside the auditorium, the cool Colorado air wrapped around me. Danny gave me a small nod, Sarah clapped me on the shoulder, and Colonel Whitaker's steady voice carried in the night. Boundaries held, Major. Well done. It wasn't just about the mission anymore. It was about me, finally drawing a line that no one could cross again. Back at Fort Carson, I sat at my desk and picked up my challenge coin. I pressed it against my chest, right over my heart. In the reflection of the darkened window, I saw not a forgotten daughter or a mock sister, but a soldier who had given her all and stood tall despite it. My family would never see me the way I had once wished they would, but that was no longer my loss, it was theirs. My worth was written in the lives I'd saved, in the oath I had kept, and in the flag that fluttered over the base that night. I slipped the coin back into my pocket, stood, and walked toward the sound of my unit laughing in the mess hall. That was my family now, the one that never doubted me, never mocked me, never turned away. I paused at the door, took a steady breath, and whispered the truth I had carried in silence for too long. My family now is my country. And with that, I stepped forward, finally free. I walked away that night, knowing I had finally drawn the line. My family didn't see me when it mattered, but my country always did, and that was enough. Sometimes the real revenge is not in fighting back, but in choosing who truly deserves a place in your life. Now I wonder, if you were in my shoes, would you forgive, or would you walk away too?